So I've been really struggling with even talking about democracy.
Democracy. Yeah, we
Yeah.
don't have to talk about democracy. We can talk about organizations or how organizations can grow or improve.
Well, so what's difficult about democracy for me, like I always have a problem with left and right, right? Like progressive and conservative, because I feel that like people are just not that simple. Like we can be both at the same time,
Yeah.
right? And not only that, but depending upon scale, we are we have radically different perspectives. Like there's this guy that wrote a book called Skin in the Game, Nassim Taleb, and he has this quote that I really love. He says, at the federal level, so at like the nation state level, he's libertarian. Okay, at the state level, he is Republican. At the local level, he's Democrat. Okay, and at the family or the friends level, he's socialist.
Dictator.
No, socialist.
Okay.
So like everybody shares everything.
Okay.
Okay, when you're at the state, it's like, okay, we can be a bit progressive because it's all for our state. At the federal level, it's like, man, just get out of here. Just you do your thing, I'm doing my thing. I have my freedom. Do not tread on me, right? And I think that actually most people, if you are honest with them, right, they will think that way. Like your friends, your family, if they need money, you give them money, right? Like, should you give all of your money so the whole of Taiwan or the whole of America can be healthy? It's like, no. Like I got to take care of my family first, right? So it's like we have these different ways of organizing, these different ways of governing at different levels.
Right.
Yet we're given this one size kind of fits all solution. The other thing really bothers me about democracy is like, so it's a process for making decisions. Okay? But if you said, like take marriage, for example, should it be democratic? Like, would you want people to vote like who you should marry?
I am the last person to answer that question.
Right? So like the only thing worse than a democratic process for marriage would be a dictator saying who you marry. And that's worse, right? Like if your parents say you're going to marry that person, that's probably worse than if you have 5 friends and if 3 of the 5 say you're going to marry that person, then you do it, right? But that's not what you want. Like I think most people ultimately want to be able to self-govern.
Right.
Right? Now, how do we do that in a way that doesn't hurt other people? Like it's not like I want to live in this selfish world where I'm happy and you're miserable. That's no good. Right? And like the coronavirus made that super clear.
Right.
Like really, really clear that we're in a connected world. But this problem that I always hit up against, that I'm always trying to reconcile, is that I am not like a hardcore sort of, I got my stuff, screw you. But I'm also not like, hey, let's go pure democracy on everything. Let's just vote for everything. Like I want to pick my wife. Like I want to pick my job. Like I don't want to have people vote for that. Right? Like to me, that's insane.
Yeah.
Right? And then like when I'm at my friends and my family, if my friend's on hard time, well, I'll do anything. Right? So these are like completely radically
Hybrid.
different systems. Yet we're forced to pick, okay, either we're democracy or we're a dictatorship. But it's almost like you want these different levels, but there's no like we don't have this goes back to this language and this like Neuralink thing, right? Where it's like we don't have a good language to explain governance at different levels.
That's interesting because we talked about GovZero.
Yeah.
Yeah, off the table when we were not in the studio. And you like GovZero. And
I love GovZero.
okay, and it's one of the reasons why you restored faith in politics or political discussions.
I restored faith in the democratic process.
Okay.
I still hate politicians. Right? I still think they're monkeys throwing poo. Okay? But this process, like, could you actually use a democratic process where the people can participate? That's the part that GovZero inspired me. I was so excited about that.
Okay, so for those who have no idea what GovZero is a hacker collective. So basically, it's a group of hackers, but they're not organized. So each of them represents him or herself only, and they're individuals. But GovZero is an online platform for everyone to contribute and for everyone to access. And then in Taiwan,
But how do they organize? Like,
So-
it's still very organized, but it's very different, right?
so for me,
Like, what does the average person in Taiwan understand about GovZero?
Okay, so I am not one of the hackers. I'm not in the organization, but for me, I can access their website and the information, and they have made information public and transparent.
Where are they getting this information from?
Okay, so basically, Taiwan's government has some information that's made accessible to the general public, but there may not be digitized. For example, government budget. Okay, so they are available in paper form, and then there's a bunch of people working on the GovZero website, digitizing everything. So and visualizing them. So they turn chart into interactive pies. So you can click on each piece of the pie and then check more details about how government is spending taxpayers' money. And then there's one thing that's really interesting about GovZero is issues over labels. So if, for example, one of the project that I like about GovZero is that they publicize donations received by all candidates or all politicians. So, the law says that you have to make it public. But before GovZero digitizing this, no one really had ideas about, how much money did this candidate receive from that TV station or that radio program.
There was this joke that when Apple was suing Samsung because Samsung kept copying the iPhone design. And I think there was a judge that said, okay, Samsung has to pay Apple $500 million. It was some number like that. Okay. It could have been $100 million, but it was a big number. And there was this meme that went around the internet. And it was that Samsung sent $100 million in pennies to Apple headquarters. So they showed these huge like dump trucks full of pennies, right? And it's like, you can't do anything with that, right? And so much of government is releasing information in a format that people can't do anything with. To me, it's like just giving somebody like $100 million worth of pennies. It's completely useless. Like, what are you going to do with this?
Right. So I would say that these hackers collected the pennies.
Yes.
And then
they packaged them up.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then made it very, very clear, very, very detailed for dummies like me to have a clearer idea of what the government is doing.
So are these hackers, like, what's their background? Where are they coming from? Are these mainly coming from the schools, from open source projects? Like, I was reading a bit, and it sounds like there's a lot of open source culture, but it's not purely open source. It's different. Where do they come from?
I don't know. I have no idea, and I don't think anyone has I don't think anyone has a list of all of the hackers contributing to GovZero.
Does people here think about these as
so
what's the role that they see? Like, what's the role that you see GovZero playing right now? Let me ask you that first.
I didn't know anything about GovZero until I participated in the Sunflower Movement.
Yeah.
So there was a movement in Taiwan in 2014 when the Congress was about to pass a set of bills that were in favor of China's investment. It's called Surface Trade Act. And supposedly this act should be reviewed in the Congress clause by clause. But somehow one of the committee members decided to rush it into passage. And then when people found out about it, there were protests around the Congress against this rushed decision. And then they were asking for public hearings and committee reviews for this bill, clause by clause. And then the pro-China political party was very reluctant about this clause by clause review. So the protests became bigger and bigger, and finally, in one evening, about 50 students broke into the Congress, and then they occupied the Congress. And
I think you told me you played a role there, right? Like, can you tell me?
Okay.
How did that go down from your perspective?
I was working at home. And then my brother, who was 7 years younger than me, said that, oh, did you know that some college students broke into the Congress? And I said, I have no idea. And then he just went out.
Were you even interested in politics at that point? Or were you just focused on your interpretation stuff?
That's a tough question.
Okay.
Because I interpreted for politicians.
Oh.
I interpreted for the president and the vice president in the first 3 years of my career. And then I interpreted for the defense ministry and the intelligence community. So
Did you have a high opinion of these people, or you're just like, all these guys are dirtbags? Or
I like them, actually. I like them as people. So I know that they are not likable. Okay, so for example, I like Anette Lu, Lu Xiulian.
Okay.
She was the vice president when I was working in the foreign ministry. And then I can tell you a personal story.
Sure.
Yeah. When I got this job, I was the youngest interpreter ever being hired for that position. And then my senior colleagues would say something like, oh, you know what, the job is very scary and it can be very stressful. And then if you make one mistake, even if you translate it, so you may translate for 10,000 words and then you make one mistake and then you're banned forever. And then you'll be isolated, you'll be frozen. So they were telling me scary stories like that. And then 2 months into the job, I got an opportunity to interpret for Anette Lu. And then they were like, oh, you know what? She graduated from Harvard and she speaks English fluently. So she's really picky about interpreters. And then you gotta be really prepared.
You gotta be perfect.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I arrived at her office 15 minutes earlier, and her secretary was super nice to me. She was like, oh, would you like to have some tea and chocolate before this starts? And then Anette Lu, she welcomed the delegation one by one at the door. And then she welcomed everyone in English. And then I thought, okay, maybe this is a cue. So maybe she won't let me translate today. And then when she got seated, she said that, I met you before when I was visiting the United States. I wasn't a politician then, but right now I'm the vice president of this country. So I'm going to speak Chinese now. And we have a very young professional interpreter with us today. So I'm going to give her a try.
Okay.
Yeah, and then she spoke for about an hour. Oh, she was meeting the granddaughter of Eisenhower.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So they were friends before.
So were you like freaked out for that first time? Like, were you calm? Were you confident?
I was just really excited.
You're ready to go.
Yeah.
And she made you feel like, okay, you can do this, huh?
I have a feeling that she trusts me, but it's also a test drive. So it's like make it or break it. Yeah.
How did you do?
I couldn't tell, but her staff were smiling. So I think I did an okay job. And then when the meeting was over, she said, can you stay here for 5 minutes? And then she walked these people out. And then she came back to her office. And then I was standing there. I had no idea why she wanted me to stay for another 5 hours. And according to my colleagues, maybe she wanted to give me some critiques or some feedback. So I was just waiting for my performance review. And then she said, oh, take a seat. And then she said in Taiwanese dialect that, did you know that I went into jail? And I said, of course, everyone in Taiwan knows that you went to jail for a very long time. And she went to...
What was she in jail for?
Democracy.
Oh,
Right. She was a activist when Taiwan was under the martial law. So basically, these political movements were not allowed, were illegal at that time. So she was put into prison for a very long time, I think over 10 years.
wow.
Yeah, yeah. And then she said, you know what she said? She said, I could speak English very well when I went to Harvard. And then I lost my proficiency in jail.
Wow.
And then when I was listening to your interpretation, I was actually taking an English class. She's like 40 years older than me, and she went to Harvard, and she's the vice president, and she was so humble. Yeah. And then every time she saw me, she would say, okay, I'm counting on you.
That's cool. That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. So I like her. I know that she's not an amicable politician, and she sometimes makes remarks that people don't appreciate, but I just like her as a person. And then because of that, because of these personal connections, it was very hard for me when a million people were so in 2007 or 6, Hong Shanjun, okay, when I think it was 2006. Yeah,
2006.
right. 2006, a million people requested to depose the then president
Okay.
because of corruption scandals. Right. Someone initiated a campaign to depose Chen Shui-bian, the then president, and then a million people joined him.
To depose him.
Yes. And then they besieged the presidential office on the National Day. So it was actually quite awkward and embarrassing to be the president's interpreter on the National Day when you saw that the presidential office was surrounded by spikes.
To protect it, huh?
Right.
Wow.
And usually the National Day is the biggest event of the year. And then you saw all of the ambassadors and representatives, they had to go through security checkpoints to come to the presidential office and say congratulations.
So did you feel, so I'm trying to get into your headspace. So like when the students were rushing the legislative branch, I guess, right?
Yeah, the Congress.
Congress, like were you like conflicted?
Oh.
Like should I help the kids or should I help the politicians? Like was there a conflict going on or you just like your brother saw this but you weren't paying attention and then you felt you could play a role, I guess, right?
Yeah.
But did you stay out because you were?
No, that's really interesting because I interpreted for presidents from both parties.
Okay.
And then what I found people are really curious, genuinely curious or interested is what insiders are thinking or what insiders observed during these political events. And so when Sunflower Movement happened, I just wanted to get inside.
Okay.
And of course, I want to know what's going on there. And I want to know if my brother was there. And also, I think that people should know what's going on. These people may not be riots.
Yeah. Was there any was there any channel where regular people could understand what was going on? Like, was the media reporting this? Were they streaming it? Like, I guess 2006 was there streaming?
No,
Maybe,
no.
Right?
Sunflower Movement is 2014.
14.
Yeah.
So there would have been streaming.
The Depose campaign was 2006.
Okay, so the 2014 when they were rushing this place, like was information getting out or was it sort of stuck in there as well?
Well, at first, when people were asking for the Congress to review the Surface Trade Act clause by clause, some journalists were reporting this, but not too many. And then when students broke into the Congress, there were no journalists around. But one man broke into the Congress with them. And then this guy is in his 40s, I think. Yeah. And then he was using his iPad to stream what's going on. And then from the video streamed, I saw that electricity and water were cut in the first few hours. And then the students were building fortresses using the chairs and desks. And they were fighting against the police.
And then how did you get down there? Like, what were you thinking?
Oh, okay. So I was staying up all night waiting for my brother to come home, but he didn't. So by 3 a.m.
What was your brother doing? Just part of the protest, or?
I really don't know. I think.
To this day, you're still not sure, huh?
Yeah. I don't think he's the kind of person who's really into politics, but there's a feeling in Taiwan, especially there's a feeling among young people in Taiwan that this act can impact Taiwan's economy if it's passed. So a few days before this break-in, people were talking online about it. There's a feeling that if it's passed, Taiwan can be a new colony to China, because it's going to allow Chinese investors to invest in publishing and telecommunication and banks and hospitals, which means that, for example, there's a scenario that if it's passed, then telecommunication companies can be invested by Chinese companies. And in the future, maybe you won't be able to access Facebook or Google or Reddit on your phone because you are using internet service provided by a company that's invested by China.
So most of these kids, the students, they grew up with the internet, right?
Yes.
Like the same internet that like Americans would have, where you have this open internet, you can go anywhere you want.
Right.
Is there any censoring going on at all in Taiwan from the internet, or is it really just it's fully open?
I don't recall any censorship.
So the kids were very worried that like
Yeah.
the whole information economy would be changed.
Yeah. A lot of Chinese tourists come to Taiwan to buy books that are not allowed in China. So censorship is a very serious problem in China. But in Taiwan, we have freedom of speech and freedom of publication. So protecting the publisher industry is very important. And then one of the ways is to make sure that they're not infested by China. So that is why so many young people care about the passage of the act. They don't want the act to be passed without reviews, without public reviews, or without any public hearings. So they were protesting against it. So I don't think my brother is the kind of enthusiast or activist, but most young people at that time were really concerned with their future being impacted by the Surface Trade Act. And one thing, the Surface Trade Act was allowing China to invest in Taiwan's healthcare. And that is why many doctors and nurses supported the Sunflower Movement.
What were the hospitals and the doctors and nurses like? What were they afraid of?
It was a long time ago, so I couldn't be sure, but I checked some information these days. One of the scenarios is that in the future, when you go to hospitals or clinics in Taiwan, it's very likely that you will be treated by Chinese doctors. And then the examination system, the certification and the qualification systems in Taiwan and China are very different. Taiwan, as most people know, have a very high standard and a very high bar for doctors' qualifications and nurses' qualifications too. But in China, the standard can be inconsistent. So some people worry that if we open our hospitals and clinics for Chinese doctors to come here to practice, then in the future, the standard may be inconsistent. And also, it means that they're going to use different kind of prescriptions or different kind of procedures. And it also means that they can treat Chinese patients too. So people were worried that after China opened its markets, after Hong Kong opened its markets to China, local Hong Kong patients had to wait longer for their appointment. And this is going to happen to Taiwan. Yeah.
I see. So the students were occupying.
Okay, so I was staying up, and then when it was 4 a.m. in Taiwan, my friends in Europe woke up, and then they saw me online, and then asked me why.
How did they see you? Like Facebook or what?
Facebook.
Okay, and you were just like writing.
Yeah, I was telling them what's going on, and then I realized that they couldn't find anything about this in the English world, so I decided to get in. So I asked one of my friends who's really, really pro-green.
Okay.
And then I asked him if he knows anything about the break-in and the occupation. Is it occupation?
Sure.
Okay. And then he said he could get me in. And then I said, okay. And that entire night, my only information source was from the iPad streaming what's going on. I know that someone in his 40s was holding the iPad all night, and then he was using a mobile power bank to charge his iPad and using his phone to provide his iPad the internet access, and then he was dozing off from time to time, and there were about 20 to 30 people watching his live stream videos online. Some people commented that, oh, you should take a nap now, or you should find a way to get some sleep. So I told my friend that I want to help him. I really think that he needs a break. So when he is taking a break, I can live stream in English. So he needs some sleep anyway, and it's nighttime in Taiwan when it's daytime in other parts of the world. So a English channel can be helpful too. So I was there to complement his life.
Do you think of that as kind of Gov Zero? Like, would you think of yourself as one of these Gov Zero people or no?
I like to think that I was independent from any group.
Okay.
Because after I got...
So would Gov Zero people, but okay.
Yeah. Because after I got in, I saw that the students were very organized. They were very structured. They didn't destroy anything other than using the desks and chairs to build fortress. And they were recycling waste in the Congress.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then about 5 people were quickly assembled into an international team. So they were translating too. They were translating information on Google Docs.
In different languages? Mainly English and Chinese? Or?
Mainly English and Japanese.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh, we had a Japanese channel too. More people joined me later in the event. So we were independent, but there were about 7 of us. So we were streaming in Chinese, English, and Japanese.
Not Korean?
No. Why?
Yeah, that's interesting. I would have thought Korea would.
No, we didn't receive too much attention from Korea. Yeah, but we were independent. And then there's a group in Sunflower Movement that was responsible for international communication.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
You were just...
We were on our own.
You were autonomous. You were by yourself out there.
Right.
Interesting.
And it was the time when people started to use Google Doc for information sharing. So they were writing something like news release, but it's not official press release on Google Documents, but everyone could access it. So people would know what's going on inside, and a lot of people donated food or flashlights or water. And then they were using Google Sheets to organize the donations.
So Google tools were like,
Yeah, and hackpads.
hackpads. Yeah.
Yeah. And Google Calendar. They use Google Calendar to organize soapbox speeches.
Interesting.
And then there was street performance too outside of the Congress.
How long did the whole protest go on for?
March 18 to mid-April, so about a month.
About a month. And then, so the bill was sort of stopped, I guess, right?
Yeah.
And then this other stuff that you like the budgets. I was looking at some of the tools they made for the pricing for homes.
Oh.
So again, this is all like information that exists but doesn't exist in a form that's easy to use.
Right.
Most of this work came sort of after that year, right?
Yeah. I think it was the movement that familiarized everyone with these online tools. So people were using Dropbox and Google Drive for their homeworks or for their work. But it was the first time when people realized that, we can use Google Drive to make our country better
That's interesting.
or make our society better.
Yeah.
It's something so accessible to everyone. It's free. You don't need learning. You don't need any tutorial at all.
There's a pragmatic side to Taiwanese that I really admire. So if it was in America and you had kind of the free software, open source software, they'd be like, I'm not going to use Google. Screw Google. We're going to use like LibreOffice or something that probably would not have real-time sharing, would not allow everybody to work on it together. So there's this
Yeah, but then accessibility. So if you're using something like that, you kind of limits the participation to elite.
Okay, so this is the part that I find most interesting about Taiwan. In America, we do have a lot of open information, Freedom of Information Act, but typically the people that get involved with that, at least the ones that I've come in contact with, they're not so focused on, okay, how do we let everyone access this? Like, how do we make sure it's easy to access? The first Obamacare website, when it went up, it crashed all the time. It was impossible to use. Nobody knew what was going on. I mean, it was a humongous disaster. There was never this focus on, okay, what works, what's practical. And I feel that a lot of the stuff you're telling me is okay, it's not perfect. It's not free software. It's not open source software. It's still controlled by a company. But it's good enough to make it to where the maximum number of people that possibly could use it will use it. And I find that
the
really
key
refreshing.
here is
somehow.
mobilization.
Yeah.
The thing is, they or I wanted to mobilize as many people as possible.
Yeah.
So I want to encourage and involve as many people as possible. So I have to choose a way that is open to everyone. And then if you have an Android phone, then you have Google,
Sure.
right? So what's better than Google Doc for
Nothing,
information
really.
sharing?
Yeah.
You don't even need to go to App Store to install anything.
Was the messaging apps like Line and these chatbots, was that playing a role back then, or is this kind of more later?
I wasn't using Line to communicate with anyone inside or outside.
What were you
of the
using back then?
Maybe WhatsApp.
Yeah.
WhatsApp or
Yeah.
Facebook Messenger.
Yeah.
Facebook Messenger back then was very basic, but it was good enough.
Yeah. So
Line was something that happened later.
how much do so the people, the youth, what do you think their goal was? Was it to come up with a different way of governing, or was it hey, just open up what you're governing? Did people want to get involved with what we would call
from
politics?
what I saw,
Yeah.
people just don't want to become we just don't want to live in a colony.
Yeah, you don't want to lose control.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't want to lose democracy. We don't want to lose our freedom, and that's it.
But it seems like it went further than that, right? Like, I mean, that might have been the initial sort of catalyst.
Right.
But when you're saying like political party donations, hey, let's show really clearly who gets what money, and they're making a tool for that. Like, this is something different,
it's
right?
a process. So I think that before or at Sunflower Movement, people just didn't want to lose our future. We didn't want to lose our freedom. And then we realized that, we may lose our freedom and democracy and our future if the government is a black box.
Okay.
The black box is the key theme of the entire movement. People were talking about breaking the black box all the time in that month. So I think it's a very strong impression that tells people transparency is very important. I met so many doctors in the Congress. I interviewed them because at 2 a.m. there was nothing to do. So I interviewed them and I asked them, why you're here? What about your work? Is it too tired?
Well, these were not politicians. These were just doctors that came down to protest.
Yeah. They volunteered to come here to protect us. So if anyone needs medical attention, not just the protesters, not just the students, the journalists too, if anyone needs medical attention, they were right there. And then not just frontline doctors, we also saw nutritionists.
Wow.
And psychologists who suggested us to turn off the light after 9 p.m. Because at first it was bright like this 24 hours, and then some people were getting sleeping disorder or other problems. So actually a psychologist came in and then suggested that we leave only 10% of the light on after 9 p.m.
That's hilarious. Sounds like my mom.
But you want people to stay healthy there. Otherwise, they may become rioters.
Yeah. The other thing I remember hearing was that nobody died. Like it was this like revolution that nobody died.
Yeah, but people were injured. So at one point, the government was using water cannon on protestants.
Like broken bones or just like feelings were hurt?
No, broken bones.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, wow. So
it's a revolution. People are not that vulnerable or that fragile. So I'm talking about serious injuries.
Serious injuries.
Yeah.
Huh.
Some people were beaten.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Huh.
There was physical conflict. So nobody died, yes, but there were physical conflicts.
Wow. And then, do you think like the average person, like did this black box, did it open up? Like, do you feel that?
Oh, that's a good question. So, yes and no. So at least for me, or people around me, we didn't really know what Congress people were doing in their terms. We know that, they are lawmakers, but how do they make laws? And what discussions do they have before making a law or before putting everything in writing? We actually didn't have too much ideas. And then it's through this movement that people understand, okay, so there are political parties and different caucuses and then different committees, and committees can make trade-offs, or committee members can they can schedule public hearings and then invite people to come, but they can also schedule last-minute public hearings. And then no one shows up.
Yeah.
And then they can claim that, we already told everyone that this is going to be passed and this is going to be written into the bill. But no one objected. So we're going to do this anyway. That's what happened before Sunflower Movement. Some Congress people said that, okay, we will organize public hearings. But every time it's very last minute, and then it pissed other people off. So the protest became bigger and bigger, and eventually led to the break-in and the occupation of the Congress. So I think that the Sunflower Movement educated the general public how the Congress was working, and then what we can do about it. So there are a lot of documents that people just don't read, like the pennies. And then some educated hackers or some educated legal professionals can help us understand by translating them into plain Chinese or into infographics.
Like, is this accelerating? Like, do you feel like there's more of this, or is it kind of slowing down now?
For me, I think it's slowing. It's slowing down
Because of COVID, or
no, because I'm older.
okay.
That's why I said, for me, I feel that it's slowing down. But COVID kind of accelerated a branch of the GovZero movement or programs. So Taiwan developed a mask map at the beginning of the outbreak. And the mask map is a way to help people identify where they can find available surgical masks.
Yeah, this was very popular, right? Mm-hmm. I remember reading that, I think it was in a Wired article, that the first day it racked up like $35,000 US.
The bill?
Bill.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
From Google Maps, because Google charges you. Yeah. But then Google ended up giving the money back.
Yeah, they waived it.
Yeah. Interesting. So
Right. Oh, so some hackers developed it on their own. That's why they were charged by Google. But then the government found out about it. And then the government thought, this is a great idea. So they decided to open a government database for the developers so that the information can be updated every 30 seconds.
yeah, that's what I wanted to ask next, is really like, how is the government cooperating with GovZero? How does GovZero kind of push things back to the government? Like, does this process feel like it's working? Is there anything really interesting that you've read there or you've seen?
I think at first there are different silos.
Yeah.
The government is a silo, and then GovZero is a silo. But of course, GovZero was trying to build a tunnel into this silo, and then taking information from the government silo and then making it public. But basically, they were independent silos at first. And then we have a minister who's a hacker from GovZero, and then the two silos are connected now.
So her role.
Yeah. Audrey Tang.
Her role is to kind of build this tunnel, huh?
Right. So she is the tunnel between the two silos. So she is very sensitive, or she's constantly updated with what's going on in GovZero. That's why she could find out about the mask map.
So she's not really GovZero, right? I mean, she's not a leader of GovZero, let me put it that way, because it has no leaders, right?
I don't think she is. I think she is just one of them. She's one of the members, but she's not in the organization. Yeah.
What do politicians think?
I don't know what they think, but from what I have observed, I think Audrey Tang did a great thing. She helped government officials to understand what's lean startup, or what's lean development, or what's agile development. One of the key concepts for lean development or agile development is to learn from mistakes. But in the past, policymakers have to guarantee that their policies work. Right? So in the past, if they say, oh, we want to do this, they almost have to guarantee that this is going to work. And if not, one of them has to resign. Right? But that's not what Lean Startup means. Lean Startup means that, so you roll out a beta version, and then you collect feedback, and then you upgrade it. So she introduced this concept to the government and to everyone in Taiwan. And then we know that, okay, so there's going to be a beta version, and then it is okay for the government to change the policy later.
And is that working?
Yeah,
Because that's amazing. I mean, if that can happen, because like if you have to get something right the first time, then all you can really do is something that looked like something you've already done before.
right. That's not innovation.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then if you have to do something right in the first time, it guarantees that you're not going to take any risk.
That's right.
So take the mask distribution, for example. The original idea is that, everyone can go to a pharmacy and use your health card to buy masks at $7 a piece. And then you're given a weekly ration of like 7 pieces, something like that. I don't remember the details. And then later it was changed in about 2 weeks that, the number was changed and the price was changed. And then the distribution method was changed too. So you saw constant changes, but you know that it doesn't mean that the government has failed. It means that the government is improving. They're making improvements based on the feedback they collected from the previous week.
Yeah, I think that feedback loop of people to the government, like the shorter that feedback loop can get, it seems like the more real this whole kind of democratic experiment can be. Like I think I think what the rest of the world can learn from Taiwan is just that if you create this feedback loop, so you have the silo here, if you have somebody that can
Connect them.
tunnel, that both sides can get better, significantly better.
Yeah, and the idea of being lean and agile, I think that's really helpful too, because I think it's very innovative for government officials to change their policies constantly.
For sure.
Yeah, because in the past, people believe that if you make changes, it undermines your credibility.
Yeah.
But
Now, are the government beginning to use these tools like Google Docs and Sheets, or are they still using their systems? It's just the tunnel is more things are coming in and out of the tunnel.
I'm not sure if the government is using Google Doc. That may be too risky because you may be able to make changes without.
They're worried about that.
Yeah. But I know that Taiwan's government enjoy using Line, the instant messaging app, for public communication.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So they each have their different accounts. Like
Politicians have Line accounts.
yeah, and government departments too.
Oh, wow.
So Taiwan's CDC has a CDC Line account. And Taiwan's customs has its own account. And I think the police has its National Police Administration account too. And then they make announcements on their Line app all the time.
Interesting. Yeah. I would love to see GovZero produce more tools that would allow people here to not have to use Line or to not have to use Google Docs or not have to use Facebook, because it feels like...
Do you want something that's 100% neutral?
Well, I think it would be good to have tools that were not controlled by a corporation.
Company. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, because like at the end of the day, on Facebook, what you see is a black box. I mean, it's like we've sort of, like I get the fact that a Facebook black box is different than a government black box.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's still a black box.
Yeah.
And then this black box, the Facebook black box, is like...
It's blacker.
It's blacker, yeah, for sure. But it's also, so it's tweaking it to where it boosts ad revenue. The politician black box is also economic, right? Usually it's about the money,
Yeah.
right? And so like in both of these things, the social has been captured by the corporations. The politics has been captured by the money. So both of these black boxes are, in many ways, not conducive to, okay, how do we govern people better? Right? So I would be really curious, like, is there enough will for GovZero to start pushing out tools that would allow for the more self-governance?
Okay. Do you use HackPad?
I use HackMD. I think it's quite similar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is it?
They're also Taiwanese. I didn't even know that. Like, a lot of my friends started using HackMD, I don't know, a few years ago. And somebody on our team was like, yeah, they're down the street. Do you want to meet them? And I'm like, really? They're like, yeah, this is a great tool. So I think like that skill set must exist in Taiwan.
But wait, are HackPad and HackMD
They're
corporate
different.
products?
They are. I mean, they're startups.
Okay.
So it's not so much that it's the company producing something. It's that what's being produced is a black box.
Okay.
So I'm all for companies. I mean, of course, I'm running a company, right?
Right.
Like, I think companies are tremendous forces of good for the world. You know, the nonprofit has a really difficult, like, in my opinion at least, the incentives are really difficult for a nonprofit. The incentives for a for-profit are really simple. It's like you have to create more value than you consume. It's very, very simple. Right? And if you don't, you die, which is the way it should be. Right? And so so I'm not at all against corporations. I like corporations. I think corporations are great ways of organizing. But what I'm really concerned about are corporations that produce black boxes that then get used by society or citizens, right? Because to me, it's the same. It's like, okay, we have this black box that comes from government or a black box that comes from corporation. They both don't answer to the people.
Right. So is it possible that we can have a Wikipedia version of collaboration tools? Is it something that you're looking for?
I was looking at the tools that GovZero use, and they're really interesting. There's a bunch of them. They're very sort of, decentralized, of course, right? Google Docs is really easy to use because it's so centralized, right? And they allow you to do stuff like open it up so everyone can see the link, accessible right from the web. I got an e-residency card from Estonia.
Oh.
Right, and
How?
Oh, you can apply.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think it's been 5 or 6 years at least, right?
And what does it do?
You can basically do everything but vote. So, like, you can be a resident, right? So, like, in Taiwan, I'm a resident. I'm not a citizen,
Right.
And so I can do a lot of stuff in Taiwan, but I can't vote,
Right.
right? So I have no say in any of the governance in Taiwan. Yet I can open a bank account, get a mobile phone, get a driver's license, all of this kind of stuff. I can pay taxes,
That's important.
which they want you to do, but then
Right.
you can't vote. So, so what Estonia did was to sort of create this e-residency program where anyone in the world, if they wanted to, could participate. And it was all digital,
Okay.
so it was all online. And I remember I went to the embassy in Beijing, and they had me sign on paper, and they say, this is the last time we will ever ask you for a signature on paper.
Okay.
From now on, it's all digital. Right? And so there's a really kind of, like, I wish there was a way to get more information outside to the rest of the world, to the other democracies, that there are some key tools that really help to crack open this black box, this democratic black box.
Right.
Crack that open so things can be more sort of, hey, we'll organize on our own. We want to give speeches. Google Sheet is enough to do that. Like, you don't need a political party. You don't need any of that stuff. You can just go from the bottom up.
Right.
And then, this sort of tunnel where you have the politics and or the politicians and the people, and there's something that kind of gets things back and forth. Like, that to me is so fascinating. There's nothing like it that I know anywhere else. It's like the most interesting thing I can imagine.
Why not? I mean, why isn't America using it, or why do you think it's so unique to Taiwan? Or do you think we can replicate this or try something similar in other places?
Well, the open source movement and the free software movement was very strong in America and Europe. But it was very much like, stay in your lane. Like, we are software people. The only lobbying we would do to the government would be to make sure that, say, for example, copyright or some sort of copyright protections would not prevent the ability to make software.
Right.
And I feel like Taiwan somehow sort of said, well, okay, we can use sort of open source as a concept, not even as a tool per se. It's more of a concept, because like Gov0 was not using that much open source, at least the way I see it. And to use this sort of methodology, opening up things to look at governance again. Yeah, and it's both. Yeah, it's like, if we go back to kind of like, I want to be a libertarian at the country level, I want to be a socialist at the family and friend level. Somewhere in the middle, I'm going to be, something on that spectrum.
Right.
This Gov0-ish sort of open up the tools, let people see what's going on. Somehow, to me, that's the path. Like, that's the way that you get these. So you have left and right, and this is like a z-axis. This is a completely different axis, and that's the part that I feel is like missing from everywhere. And I don't even think Taiwanese really actually understand that the rest of the world doesn't have that.
Right. We don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's really important for us to tell everyone that this is possible, and then it's practical.
But I wish you'd go a step further and to package it such that the rest of the world could use it. I mean, what was so powerful about Linux is that it can be used anywhere. Like rockets, SpaceX sends these rockets into space and they run Linux, and governments can run Linux. And so, like, how do you get these tools for governance or tools for self-governance? Like, how do these get out to the rest of the world? I mean, they're really, really powerful, I feel like, and Taiwan is going in such an amazing direction because of these tools. But I think it's even hard to explain this concept, I feel, in like a simple, short way.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the Linux model works here.
It's not quite.
Right.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think accessibility is really important, and then mobilizing people.
It's more important than just the open part, right?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think involving people is really important no matter how tech savvy they are. I don't use Linux. If I have to go to a museum to understand rocket science or understand how the Earth is rotating around the sun, and I have to use Linux, I won't be able to get anything useful from that tour. So I think that's why visualizing information, visualizing data, and then turn words and charts into infographic is so important.
Yeah, I feel like the ability to open up information. So people that are good at explaining information, educating people about the information, like that's a process.
Right.
And oftentimes like us technical people, we just get sort of in love with the technology as opposed to understanding that the technology is to enable a process.
Right.
Right? And if that process works, then the outcomes get better for everyone. Whereas if you get sort of stuck in the technology and you're kind of too extreme, hey, okay, it has to be this kind of technology, it can't be that technology, then the outcome you wanted in the first place, break open that black box,
So I think
doesn't
that,
work.
I think tech for good,
Yeah.
tech for good can be a public good.
Yeah.
That's what software engineers or developers or technologists can think about. And when you have a goal, tech is just a mean. So it doesn't have to be a great tech tool, but it has to be accessible to everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's like the most, for me at least, that was the biggest takeaway, is that like what GovZero is doing is actually making the information and the technology accessible to sort of the widest audience possible, including the
Right.
politicians. Like this tunnel going back and forth is such a critical part. Like you remove that tunnel, you kind of snip it again, and you got the silo for government and then the silo for the hackers. And they don't really help each other to get better, right?
Yeah. When you said everyone and the widest audience, it reminds me of a personal story. So when I was providing English live streaming videos in the Congress, my co-founder then was pregnant. And I love her. I still love her, although we are not working together. And every night, her husband insists on tuning into my live stream channel so their baby can know what's going on.
Oh, wow.
They think that the entire movement and protest is going to impact her future. So you see, getting inside, telling everyone what's going on, and broadcasting it in a public channel is the key here for everyone, including a fetus.
How many people do you think like those live streams reached? Like, do you have any sense? Did you ever see any numbers on it?
My English channel, I
Yeah.
would say a few thousands.
Yeah.
And our Japanese channel reached more people. And the Japanese audience was very, very interactive.
Why do you think the English audience wasn't just fully embracing this? Like, what is it about?
My English?
I wasn't going to say that. Your English is amazing. What is it about us, English? Like us, like as in
I
people
don't
that
know.
are native
I still
English?
don't know.
Like,
That's something that I need to answer. I still don't know what English audience is looking for, or I still don't know how to engage English audience. I was just speaking what I want to say.
see, because what's so interesting to me is that, like, if I heard a podcast that was explaining
What's going-
GovZero and what's going on, I would be like, okay, this is all I'm going to listen to. Yet, there
But
are no
how
podcasts
many
that
people
do
are
that.
like you? How many of your friends are interested in knowing what Taiwan is doing? Or
No, it's not about Taiwan.
Okay.
Every one of my friends is interested in a better form of governance than democracy.
Everyone?
Everyone. And a better form of
Do you have many
markets
friends?
than capitalism. Sorry? Do I have what?
That was a bad question. Do you have many friends?
I have 2 friends. That's enough. Come on.
Okay. Every one of the 2. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I really think if you ask anyone these days, like, are they happy with the way leadership in government is going?
I agree. Not everyone is happy or satisfied, but very few people take actions. And I don't know how to engage them or how to motivate them to become more active. I'm not saying that everyone needs to
Yeah.
go to the street and then protest and then become activists. Although when I was in San Francisco, every year the parade and Women's March, there were a lot of people. So I would thought that political participation huge in the
Well,
United States.
You're just looking at one city, right?
Yeah,
And
true.
so like you take away California, take away New York, and then, everything sort of, but then even if you look at, okay, what tools do you have in California? I know about that place the best, of course, that's where I'm from. They don't have any tools like this. I mean, they're not like during COVID, there was a project called Corona Data Scraper that I really loved. And it was an open source project where it was very Gov Zero-ish. In America, public health is like a county level thing. And so you had these county officials that were putting up PDFs that were reporting, or web pages that were reporting statistics like number of infections, things like this. And people were going to these websites, going to these PDFs, scraping the information out, writing parsers that could put it into like big, huge CSV files, right? So you can make an API out of it so people could use it. So there was like the start, I felt, of this kind of grassroots, hey, let's make the data accessible. But then they stopped there. I mean, of course, there were a few dashboards, but it never really, at least from my perspective, it never really, like, no state politician that I know of at least embraced that. Of course, Trump and those guys didn't embrace it. They're like, those are fake numbers, right? So it never was able to have a material impact, right? And I think what's inspiring is that there was a protest in Taiwan. There was a new method of helping people to organize information, to busting open black boxes. And then there was the feedback from the politicians that, okay, I mean, I bet they probably didn't like it at first. They're like, I don't know about this thing. Like it's gonna make us lose our power. But
Probably.
Yeah, but they seem to at least sort of
Became okay.
there's a consensus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's a consensus that you can't stop it anyway.
But even that's a big step. Like the fact that you have to embrace it, you have to use this. That to me is a huge step.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think that. I mean, in America right now, you have mainstream media and you have internet media, and these are separate.
Right.
They don't. I mean, it's so far apart. Whereas in Taiwan, I feel like these are just completely merged. Like they're, I'm always seeing YouTube videos on mainstream media.
And our politicians take YouTube interviews.
That's right. That's right. Whereas in the West, it's like these are separate, right? And somehow it feels like politics and the people are separate still. Okay. And it's these tools that allow these to kind of work together that I find so exciting.
Okay. Yeah, we can talk about it in future episodes because our time is up. We are getting kicked out of the studio. And then I can think about how Women's March is organized in San Francisco. I have some impression that I've very
versus how it's organized here.
Yeah.
Cool.
People were using Twitter mostly, but we can talk more about it. The comparison between Women's March or Pride and Taiwan's street movement.
Cool. That'd be good.